I'm pregnant with the first girl in generations. My mother-in-law went off the deep end. For 73 years, not a single girl has been born into my husband's family. So when I got pregnant, and the skin said, it's a girl, you'd think it would be a miracle, right? Wrong. My mother-in-law didn't just snap, she declared war. And I never saw it coming. Hey, story lover. Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go. Let me paint you the picture. The Hendricks family tree looked like a testosterone factory, generation after generation of broad-shouldered men who built empires with their bare hands. My husband Zachary was the latest in this unbroken chain, following his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather into the family construction business. The walls of their home were lined with photographs of stern-faced patriarchs, each one passing down tools, traditions, and an unshakable belief that their bloodline was destined to produce leaders, male leaders. When Zachary and I got married 3 years ago, his mother Eleanor welcomed me with open arms. She was the picture of Southern grace, always baking pies, hosting Sunday dinners, and treating me like the daughter she never had. She'd often joke about how she was drowning in a sea of men, and how wonderful it would be to finally have another woman in the family. That was before the ultrasound. The moment Dr. Lincoln smiled and said those three little words, "It's a girl," I watched my husband's face light up like the 4th of July. He grabbed my hand, tears streaming down his cheeks, already planning tea parties and daddy-daughter dances. I was floating on cloud nine, thinking about pink nurseries and tiny dresses. But when we called Eleanor to share the news, the silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Eleanor? Did you hear us? We're having a girl." I heard. Her voice was flat, hollow. "We need to talk. Come over. Now." The drive to her house felt different somehow, like we were heading into a storm we couldn't see yet. Eleanor met us at the door, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't hug me. Her usually warm brown eyes were cold, calculating. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to the living room couch like we were children in trouble. What happened next shattered everything I thought I knew about this family. Eleanor disappeared upstairs and returned with a leather-bound book I'd never seen before, thick, ancient-looking, with yellowed pages that crackled as she opened it. Inside were detailed family records going back over a century, meticulously maintained genealogy charts, and something else that made my blood run cold, newspaper clippings. "Look at this," she said, her fingers stabbing at the first clipping. It was from 1952, local girl dies in tragic accident. Then another from 1967, young woman lost in house fire. And another from 1981, fatal car crash claims life of expectant mother. My hands started shaking. "Eleanor, what are you showing us?" Her laugh was bitter, completely unlike the warm woman I'd known. "Every time a girl has been born into this family, tragedy follows. Every single time. The last girl born was my sister-in-law Margaret in 1951. She died 6 months later in a farming accident that took out half the crop and nearly bankrupted the family." Zachary stood up abruptly. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. These are just coincidences." Coincidences. Eleanor's voice rose to a near shriek. 43 attempts at girls over 7 decades, Zachary. 43 miscarriages, stillbirths, and accidents. The universe is trying to tell us something. I felt like I was drowning. "Eleanor, you're talking about my baby. Your granddaughter." "I'm talking about saving this family." She slammed the book shut. "The women in this bloodline aren't meant to survive. They're cursed. And I'll be damned if I let you bring that curse down on all of us." That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor launched what I can only describe as a psychological campaign. She showed up at our house unannounced with research she'd printed from obscure genealogy websites. She cornered me at the grocery store with stories about family obligations and difficult choices. She even contacted my obstetrician, claiming to be concerned about my high-risk pregnancy. But it was the midnight phone calls that really got to me. The first one came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. My phone buzzed with a text, "Are you awake? We need to discuss options." When I didn't respond, she called. And called. And called. 17 times before Zachary finally answered and told her to stop. "She's not going to stop," I whispered to Zachary as we lay in the dark, both wide awake. "She's completely lost it." Zachary ran his hands through his hair. "I've never seen her like this. It's like something broke inside her the moment we said, 'girl.'" The breaking point came during our baby shower, the one Eleanor had insisted on throwing for us. Everything seemed normal at first. The decorations were beautiful, all in soft yellow since we'd decided to keep the gender a surprise from the extended family. Eleanor played the perfect hostess, serving her famous pound cake and chatting with my mother about nursery themes. But then came the gift opening. When I unwrapped the first pink outfit, a tiny dress my cousin had brought just in case, Eleanor went white as a sheet. She excused herself to the kitchen, and I heard what sounded like dishes breaking. When she returned, she was carrying a large, wrapped box. "This is for me," she announced, setting it down in front of me with shaking hands. Inside was the most bizarre collection I'd ever seen: sage bundles, salt, old photographs, and at the very bottom, a handwritten note that made my heart stop. Some bloodlines aren't meant to be broken. Some traditions aren't meant to be challenged. The baby you're carrying threatens everything we've built. But it's not too late to fix this. Call me when you're ready to listen to reason. E. The room fell silent. My mother gasped. Zachary's face went red with fury. "Mom, what the hell is this?" Eleanor's composure cracked completely. Tears streaming down her face, she looked directly at me and said, "I've lost 3 babies trying to give this family a girl. 3. Each one nearly killed me. Each one nearly destroyed my marriage. And you waltz in here and succeed where I failed, carrying the very thing that's going to tear us all apart." The truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about family curses or ancient bloodlines. This was about a woman who'd spent decades believing she was broken, who'd convinced herself that her inability to carry daughters was actually a blessing in disguise. And now I was proof that she wasn't special, that any woman could do what she couldn't. But the story gets worse. That night, Zachary and I decided we needed space. We packed some bags and went to stay with my parents for a few days while we figured out how to handle Eleanor's breakdown. On our second night there, my mother woke us at 3 a.m. "There's someone in your backyard," she whispered urgently. I saw a flashlight. We crept to the window and peered out. There was Eleanor, in her nightgown and rain boots, digging holes in my mother's garden by the light of her phone. When we confronted her, she was clutching something in her muddy fists, the same sage and salt from her gift to us. "I'm protecting you," she sobbed. "I'm trying to break the curse before it takes hold. Don't you understand? If I can just cleanse the ground where the baby will play, maybe we can change the pattern." Zachary called his father immediately. Within an hour, Eleanor was in the back of an ambulance, being taken for a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. While Eleanor was in the hospital, Zachary's father, Richard, finally told us the truth about the family curse. There had indeed been girls born into the Hendricks family, 7 of them over the decades. But they hadn't died from supernatural causes. They'd all been given up for adoption, their births covered up, their existence erased from family records. Richard's own grandmother had orchestrated the whole thing, believing that the family business and wealth should only pass through male heirs. She'd systematically pressured every pregnant woman to give up their daughters, sometimes through manipulation, sometimes through outright coercion. Eleanor knew. She'd always known. She'd been complicit in giving up her own sister-in-law's baby girl in 1979, a secret that had eaten at her for decades. When I announced I was having a daughter, it triggered a complete psychological break. She couldn't bear the thought of another girl being sacrificed to maintain the family's twisted tradition, but she also couldn't face the guilt of everything she'd done. The curse wasn't supernatural. It was generational trauma wrapped in family mythology, perpetuated by people too afraid to break a cycle of control and deceit. Here's where the story gets its redemptive twist. Eleanor spent 3 weeks in treatment, working with therapists who specialized in family trauma. When she was released, she came to us with something I never expected: the truth and a plan to make things right. Together, we hired a private investigator to track down the 7 girls who'd been given up over the decades. We found 5 of them, all grown women now, living full lives completely unaware of their Hendrix heritage. The family reunion we organized 6 months later was unlike anything you could imagine. My daughter, born healthy and perfect in May, met her aunts, cousins, and half-sisters for the first time. The living room that had once displayed only stern-faced patriarchs now buzzed with the laughter of women sharing stories, comparing baby photos, and slowly rebuilding connections that had been severed by fear and tradition. Eleanor has become the grandmother I originally thought she was, maybe even better. She's in therapy twice a week, working through decades of guilt and trauma. She's also become an advocate for family transparency, helping other women in our community who've experienced similar pressures around gender preferences and inheritance. But the most shocking development came just last month. Eleanor announced she's writing a book about our experience, working with a ghostwriter to document not just our story, but the stories of the other women who were forced to give up their daughters. She wants to expose how easily family traditions can become tools of oppression, and how breaking these cycles takes tremendous courage. The woman who once saw my pregnancy as a threat now sees it as the catalyst that saved her family from perpetuating a lie that had caused pain for generations. My daughter is now 8 months old. Her name is Margaret, after the sister-in-law Eleanor always claimed had died, but had actually been forced to give up her own child. The real Margaret, now 72 and living in Oregon, cried when we told her we were naming our daughter in her honor. Sometimes I look at my little girl and think about the alternate universe where Eleanor's fear had won, where another generation of women might have been convinced to sacrifice their daughters to maintain a tradition built on shame and control. But that's not our story anymore. Our story is about a woman who broke so completely that she found the strength to rebuild herself and her family from scratch. About a husband who learned that sometimes protecting your wife means confronting the darkest parts of your own family history. About a little girl who will grow up knowing she's not cursed, she's the blessing that finally broke a curse that was never supernatural to begin with. And about me, a woman who discovered that sometimes the most dangerous family members aren't the ones who reject you. They're the ones who love you so much they're willing to destroy everything to protect a lie they've convinced themselves is truth. The Hendrix family still builds things. But now, instead of just constructing buildings and perpetuating secrets, we're building bridges to each other, to the truth, and to a future where our daughters know they're not mistakes to be hidden, but miracles to be celebrated. Eleanor was right about one thing: having the first girl in generations did change everything. Just not in the way any of us expected.